Okay, so I'm trying to be a little techie here. If you have a smartphone, just type that word into that phone number, and you can have all of these notes on your phone or your device. So, trying to make it so it's a little easier for you. Is this loud?
Can you make the image bigger?
I tried. That's as good as I can. Take a picture of it and zoom in on it. That's what we learned to do with puzzles. I learned how to do that. It's just LDS notes to 848-216-7630. I'll do that slower. 848-216-7630. Just put in where your text things, then just text that word. You'll get a reply. It'll ask a few questions, then it'll send you in your email everything I'm showing you today. Okay? So, I like general conference time. As a scientist of human communication, one of my fascinations is the miraculous communication that takes place during general conferences. You have one speaker, you have hundreds of thousands of listeners, and you have, I don't know, an average of 10,000 people who think that talk was written just for them. That talk was written just for me. I've worked hard to be a student of conference talks and try to get familiar with them. And then someone says, especially the part when they said this, and they proceed to misquote the general authority. Okay? They proceed to twist their words. Now, as a scientist, the Tetris twist, I got a couple of funny questions to go with this in a second. But when I was in school, they taught you to give your client an assignment or give them some things to think about. And then in the next visit, follow up with them to hold them accountable for what they learned and what they applied. And I started to see a pattern where I'd sit across from them and says, okay, now walk me through what you remember from our last visit. And they would say, you said the greatest thing, it was so awesome, changed my life. And then they proceed to misquote me. Okay? Has anyone ever had the experience where someone twists your words in a good way? Okay? In a good way. All right? Now, one of my goals as a spiritual scientist is to take concepts that we learn in our religion and analyze or try to figure out the scientific explanation for them. For instance, what is the scientific explanation of the word inspiration? Okay, how do you explain that in a scientific manner? Right? Now, you can say it completely psychological. Somewhere in the subconscious, some universal consciousness, an idea floated into your mind, because I'm not going to tell you that there's a Holy Ghost, because that is against the rules of being a therapist. Right? Okay, so we lie to them and tell them, well, we don't confirm it was the Holy Ghost, but what is the scientific definition of inspiration? Intuition? That's not scientific, right? Is it actually possible for an outside entity that has your goodwill in mind to transfer information into your mind in a way that improves your life? Is that scientifically possible? Yes? Have you noticed we are a room of LDS people who are hesitant to agree with that? Okay, if we were in Sunday school, how many would you hesitate? Yeah, oh yeah, totally. Revelation, what's the scientific explanation of revelation? Okay, I don't know the difference between inspiration and revelation. In my mind, revelation's a little more big, a little more complete. But in general conference, here's what I figured out. It's an amazing Tetris game. If the speaker and the listener both have the Spirit, the speaker is dropping Tetris pieces down into this space. Okay? And then the listener has the opportunity to experience a twist and a slide of the concept into the right place in their brain. So if this was your game, what would you do with this piece? Any Tetris players? Rotate what? 90 degrees, and then? Just drop right in that spot. Now here's a fun question for you. I have 8 brothers. That's another interesting fact about me. Okay? If this was your friend's game and you were a jerk, okay? I know some of you can't relate to that, but I have brothers. Okay? What would you do with the piece if they left the room for a second and you picked up their Tetris game? Any suggestions?
I'll turn it the other way and put it on top of the blue piece.
I know, right? Right here in its T form. Wouldn't that be funny? Right? Isn't that funny? And they come back, what did you do? Okay. I would like to propose, and many of you have already figured this out and discovered, it's clarified in the book Like Dragons Do They Fight, that if there is a good entity that has your goodwill in mind, that will twist words and have them mean something different than what you meant them to be in a good way, is it possible for another intelligent entity to twist words in such a way that's intended to cause harm? Okay? Now, what is one of the most unpleasant experiences? You're trying to have one of those like important conversations with somebody, quite probably your spouse, okay? And they say this thing that drives you, especially if you're a self-aware scientist, and they say to you, you are twisting my words. Okay? Now, you who are self-aware, you rewind the audio tape inside of your head and you look for that part where you picked up their words and manually twisted them so that they could intentionally offend you. Yes, you want to be offended by what I say. Yes, I do. It's my favorite thing. Thank you. You like getting mad. You like it. Okay? You twisted my words. Okay? As scientists, there's no space allowed for us to consider the possibility that there is an interruptive agent who participates in the twisting of the words. All right? This is universal. You want to try an experiment? Okay? Watch this. Gentlemen, this one's for you. Your favorite woman, your most important woman, approaches you and says, we need to talk. Translation? I'm in trouble. So did you twist her words?
Just interpret it.
Yeah.
You twisted them. No. No. No, you did not. Why are we not clarifying that if the Holy Ghost can twist words in a good way, Satan can twist words in a bad way? We keep calling it, I'm twisting the words, but you're a scientist. Check your brain. Did you pick up their words and twist them into a new meaning in your head manually and on purpose? No. So we come up with this really cool concept that no one can prove called a subconscious that makes stuff up in your head that you have no control over. Okay? And they say, run around inside your head looking for it and try to fix it, when our religion gives us scientific information. If you know where it's coming from, you can change it correctly. Okay? Because if you go to the wrong place to try to fix it, you're going to keep not getting it fixed. All right? So please, consider that idea. It's important. So, the miraculous spirit-assisted communication is when we receive information into our head that is better than what was intended, or more suitable than what was intended. And did we twist those words? You know, the prophet was up there speaking. I twisted his words into something better. Right? Well, if we believe we're twisting the words into something worse, then we have to believe that we're twisting the words into something better. Okay. By the way, if you have the electronic version, you can get a copy of the Like Dragons They to Fight book for free on your ebook just by tapping that and following its instructions. All right, so now let's watch what happens between a husband and a wife. Oh, by the way, I can do that in a second. So there we are. Here's the husband's circle. Here's the wife's, or you can pick which one's which. Here we have a moment. We're sitting across from each other having one of those important conversations, and one of them reads the other person's comment, gesture, whatever, with a twist. Okay? So now we have the thought, interpretation, distortion, flash. It comes into the brain. By the way, there's Pavlovian versions of this where Satan will take a piece of information that's come into your mind and give it a little extra nudge in one direction or another. Now, this is where it gets really fun, all right? I first thought that Satan could only influence thoughts, and I still believe that that's true, but have any of you had that really cool experience? Well, wait a minute. Raise your hand if you were slightly socially a jerk in high school as a guy. Thank you. All right, now, of course, I have brothers, so this is something you think about all the time in high school. All right, me and my buddy are in math class of 60 seconds early. Our third buddy is coming late, all right? And he's hustling. We know he's hustling because he's always right on the last second. And just to be funny, we want to be funny, okay? We're going to tell him as he walks in the door, dude, are you ready for the test today? He's all like, what? What test? And you're like, there's no test. Ah, ha, ha, ha. That's funny, right? Yeah. That's so funny. I know, he was a jerk in high school. Okay. The ladies are all like, that is so mean. That's so rude. Am I close? Okay. Now, what actually happened scientifically in that moment? We said something. We gave him a piece of information. It doesn't matter whether it's true or not. Okay? His animal brain sends the message that he should have some version of a fight-flight response to it. He has a panicked response. So we call that a chemical reaction. What happens right after we tell him it's not actually true? Does he go straight back to the chemical experience he had before he came in the room? No, Robin?
He's angry.
He's angry? And he's angry because he's having a chemical reaction, and he can have a secondary chemical reaction associated with anger. How many different chemicals are associated with the, 300 different negative emotions we can have? Chemical stew in the brain, okay? Now, if you're the jerk, it's especially funny if 10 minutes later he leans forward and says, I hate you guys. That still bugs me that you said that. What does that mean scientifically? The chemicals are still bothering him, and that's funny. Right? Okay, now, I'm going to keep referring to jerks because it's the nicest word I've come up with so far for Satan. Okay? Because imagine him watching a man and a woman, a husband and wife, who are on the verge of having a vitally important conversation that could solve many of their problems. The last thing he needs is for this conversation to go well. And so he picks just the right idea that'll cause a chemical reaction, thus creating feelings. And some of us have gotten slightly effective at noticing our feelings. But when was the last time you said, I think I'm having somewhat of a chemical reaction in my cerebral cortex? It is moving my frontal lobe energy into my animal brain, and I'm not able to function correctly right now. Wouldn't that be a cool thing to say during a conversation with your spouse? Okay? Now what happens when we are doing that? Someone was teaching a lesson earlier this week, and where they're talking about how there's a great memory box inside of your head. So this is a little memory box. By the way, I cheated a little bit. I was hoping all of you would want the electronic copy, but I made old-fashioned copies of this entire presentation for those of you who are not technology sound. Pass those around. By the way, they are very small, though. I was saving paper and ink because I'm from Idaho and I'm cheap. Okay. Was that offensive?
I'm from Idaho, not offensive.
Thank you. Rinse your Ziploc bags and iron your tinfoil. Okay. My mother taught me those things. Okay. So when we are having feelings that we're trying to sort out, we access our memory banks to try to find similar feelings. And so the phrase, here we go again, is a great example of reaccessing those memories. And so, of course, my masculine behavior is going to be so edifying. Can we talk? Yeah. Sure, whatever. We can talk. Okay, that's edifying, right? And she says, I feel so much love for you right now when you talk like that. No? Okay, so now she gets to have this experience, and of course, she gets to have her own interpretation distortion with a little help from the dark side. You know, he's going to be like this forever, like eternity. And that's going to cause a chemical reaction in her, which creates feelings, which creates more. So we call this, I'm trying to find one of those images of those double tornadoes because I thought it'd be really cool. And this was supposed to be like animated so you could see how the tornado is spinning really fast. All right. We have a term called lost battles. We don't use slip-ups. We don't use oopses, because I want everyone to be reminded that anytime you behave contrary to your value system, it's because you were attacked. Because a 7,000-year-old genius who prefers for you to be embarrassed, prefers to be ashamed, prefers for you to do things that are against your value system. We have 3 of the normal categories: the fight behaviors during conversations, yelling, name-calling, gaslighting, threats, verbal spankings, the desperate teacher syndrome. Verbal spanking, I saw a woman do that in my office the other day. Her finger was working, and I'm all, are you hoping that's going to work? The verbal clawing, cornered cat syndrome. Anyone ever seen cornered cat syndrome? Okay, the woman's backed into a corner and she just lashes out and you want a piece of this? Most of us therapists don't get to see that as much as it happens in the homes. You've heard the stories. Okay, the cold walkout is the flight versus the comforting walkout. I see this image of someone walking out and pull the pin on the hanger and chuck it behind them as they walk out. I think you can mix that up with, what do they call, gaslighting. You know, there's, I'm still not quite sure what that word means. It's got 1,000 different definitions. Passive aggressive, at least I'm not like your mom. Okay, or the ever famous glazed over eyes during the freeze. Are you even listening to me? Yeah. Just keep talking. I can hardly wait till this is over. Okay, now, what I'm going to show you now is some tools on how to keep this from happening. Some tools that you can pass on to your clients. There's lots of different names for what we just described, but we need to, it's not very fun to go through that. Right. It's kind of fun when you discover something very powerful that's extremely simple. So we're going to teach you what's called the 4-square listening tool. Now, it's hard to convince. I know that a client is flooded when they say, there's no time to get a piece of paper, Maurice. There's no time to find a pen and write it down. Now, ladies, if you're in one of those tense conversations and you can feel your husband getting flooded and maybe you're getting a little flooded too, what would you do if he says, hold on a second. What you're saying is really important to me and I want to get a piece of paper and write it down. She's laughing because that'll never happen, right? Okay, she just had a little flash in her head that tells her something about something. Okay, now ladies, really, what would you experience if the guy says, hold on a second, what you're saying is so important to me, I want to write it down? You'd want to hug him? Would you stop talking for a second? Yes. Yeah. Would you just stop for a second? These guys tell me, that wouldn't stop her. She's like a locomotive, man. She rolls right over the top of me. I says, well, if you throw a hand grenade at her while she's saying it, that won't work. So you have to practice it. Now, square number 1. Now, if any one of you can find a shorter way to label these squares, please share it with me. Square number 1. This is where you write down things he or she says that I, the writer, have a strong desire to disagree with. Okay? Everyone says, man, that's going to fill up so fast. How many times when she says, you never, you always, you're not going to, I can't trust you, ever, anytime, anywhere. Okay? Now, we've all seen the conversations fall apart where the person starts addressing the thing that wasn't even the central point of what was needed to be addressed. Right? So, we have learned that the frontal lobe, the brain, can only hold so much before it becomes Lucy in the chocolate factory. Ever remember that? And then all this information starts coming in and they start throwing it all over the place. And so the urgency to share becomes something where the other person stops listening. I've asked couples, women, often women, where they get very enthusiastic about sharing important information. Like how I said that? Okay? And they stop even noticing if the guy's listening anymore. She's da-da-da-da-da-da-da, and he's glazed over. He left the room like 7 minutes ago. Okay? Now imagine, ladies, you're talking, the guy stops you and says, hold on a second, I haven't finished writing down the last one, and what you're saying is so important to me, I want to get it down on paper. What happens to your brain? What happens to your cadence? What happens to your speed? Okay, now the other reason, I'm going to explain a little bit more in a little bit, but why we want him to write it down is so that he doesn't have to disagree with it right now, but he's also not just letting her say that. You just want me to let her say that? That's not true? Okay, sorry if I'm doing pronouns. I should switch them more often, but just bear with me, okay? So we can start writing down things that they disagree. Now, You can use full sentences, you can use bullet points, you don't have to use everything, just write it down, okay? Next thing.
What if you need a bigger sheet?
That could be possible. Now, when I do this in reality, you move this line down a little bit so there's more space. Now, this is one that's really nice. Things I could say that probably will not help. Now, look at it scientifically. How often do you see your listening client have something they need to say, but it's stuck there so they stop listening? They're just holding that thing they need to say, and they're not listening anymore. So we just say, write down if you need to say it, just put it right there. Just write it down, okay? Now, it's the PowerPoint doesn't let me do this, but there's this gesture that is very powerful, okay? We live in Utah. Imagine that gesture your foot makes when you're trying to brake in snow. Okay? You just kind of press it. Okay? Now this gesture is a little offensive. Okay? But when you're having a hard time formulating your words, if there's a gesture that goes, just says, hold on a second. Just hold on a second. I want to finish writing that down. Just hold on a second. Hold on just a second. I want to write that down. Okay? You can fill in both those squares. Now here's the fun one. I get the funniest responses to this. Things she says that could be inspired. You guys are all, there's nothing ever going to go in that square. Okay, now ladies, if you saw your husband looking for something to put in this box, gentlemen, if your wife was looking like she's trying to put something you say into this box, what does that do to the tone of the conversation? Okay, I'm looking for something you're saying or a translation of something you're saying that is inspired. Something, because how many of you talk without an important message? Right? No, I like to talk for fun and to be annoying. No, if you open your mouth, you have an important message. Is that correct? Then there's something that goes in this square. And if the guy can't find it, there's a problem. If the woman can't find it, there is a problem. And then here's the next challenge. Things I could say that are probably inspired. I need to be looking for inspired things to say in this conversation, not just being reactive. Okay? So the process is, watch for when you start to feel chemically altered during the interaction. So you're interacting with them. Now, we are advanced people, and yes, it takes a little bit of time to practice training our people. That joke I says, I'm just monitoring my brain chemistry to see when I get a little out of whack. Imagine your client actually being capable of doing that and actually doing that. Like, hold on, I'm monitoring my brain chemistry while we're talking. It's important to me. How cool would that be? Okay? Using a breaks in the snow hand gesture, request a moment to write things down, get paper and pencil, draw the squares. Write down anything that sticks in your brain in the appropriate square. By sticking, it means anything that hits your head and you can't keep listening because it's clogging your listening skills. Okay, hold on a second. I'm not listening to you because I got something clogged in my head. I need to write it down. Okay? What you're saying is important to me. I want to make sure I get this down. Would you mind holding on for a second? Now, phrases like that, you really want to practice, 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 practice. Just like an athlete does, just like a soldier does. As soon as the animal brain kicks in, they're not going to be able to think of the right words to say. So you want to practice the words that you say that will help calm this conversation down instead of keeping it heightened. And then before responding, before saying anything, reconnect with the spirit, find constructive interpretation of what has been said, and bring thoughts that add value. Now, is this the next one? Okay, go back here for a second. Once I resigned myself, adjusted, I don't know the right word for it, but resigned myself sounds like a bad thing, but once I finally believed that my wife doesn't talk unless she has something important to say. And so she may not be able to translate it into man English right now. She may not be able to figure out or to calm her own chemicals down in this moment to make sure she communicates well. But in our culture, in our religion, we believe that if we have an important message for somebody or someone has an important message for us, we have a thing called the spirit of tongues, the gift of tongues, where we can learn to interpret what other people say into useful information. Okay? If I'm the man in this conversation, it's my responsibility to use some psychological version of a Urim and Thummim to find what she's trying to say instead of spending all of my time nailing her down to what she actually said. Okay? I can take my list and I can say, thank you. I'm going to need a minute to comprehend what you've been saying. I'm going to need a minute to understand what you've been saying. And so I'm going to go hang out with the Holy Ghost for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, until I get a correct interpretation of your message. How many times do we see couples forcing the other person to say it in a way that's my language? So conversations become three-legged sack races, collapsing quickly. Here's a rule that sounds religious, but it's very scientific. A lot of my studies in preparation to be a therapist and for this presentation come from Gottman, John Gottman. Never in his literature does he say this: if you don't have the Spirit, don't talk. Any Gottmanites know what he says, please? Okay. He uses finger clips with pulse meters, and he has discovered that there's a physiological representation for when you leave your frontal lobe and go into your animal brain. All right? And there is a psychological experience that happens in that moment. And so, does the Spirit leave us? I don't know exactly what he does and what he doesn't do, but I do know that there's a certain set of sensations in my body and my mind when I do have the Spirit with me. Okay? And if it's not present, it's really not smart for me to talk. So after you have crashed and skinned up your knees during a conversation, do I need to visualize that any further? Okay. Stop running. That makes all the sense. Hey, stop running. Stop talking. Dust yourself off, clear out your emotions and your chemicals. Go for a walk. I try to set the stage early for my clients. It says, I know that you've read a lot of things about the way to improve communication is to have more communication. I would like to invite you to consider the possibility that more communication is not better communication. And then I challenge them. I invite you to only talk 1 minute out of every 10. 9 minutes of quiet for every 1 minute of talking. Okay? It takes me, at least, I've been working on this for years, to experience the unrequested, unpleasant biological response to my spouse's verbations. Need I say anything more? I have psychologically videotaped. I have this one story when I was really trying to get this right. She requested, or it was one of those times where we need to have an important conversation. My wife is a skilled psychologist type person, so she's not amateur at this stuff. And she spent, as far as I could tell, hours prepping herself. She was ready to talk to Maurice. Okay? And I was ready. So I went in, and she sits on the bed, I stand on the side of the bed. So I could never find the right body language. So, I still can't. I pull out my psychological video camera, click, put it right here, got it right on her. She proceeds to talk. And somewhere like 28 seconds later, the sledgehammer to my chest. Oh, this is the most painful conversation ever. And the energy's starting to build. I go, wait. And she's all, oh. I rewind the videotape. There is nothing on the videotape of her doing anything wrong from my clinical perspective. She never made her voice tone wrong. She never did her face wrong. She did it perfectly. Can't tell you how many times I've had women doing these large women's conferences, and they say, tell me how I can talk to my husband so he won't get mad. The guys are laughing. What's the answer to that? There is no way you can talk. That won't keep her. You will get mad. Now here's the sad part. If we go back to that original concept, either she is the problem or he is the problem. Now I can review the same videotape and I go, when did I twist her words? And I can guarantee you I never twisted her words, but I did experience a twist of her words. Okay? What I heard her say was, you are an inadequate father. I can guarantee you I didn't twist that, and I know she didn't say that, but that's what I heard. So if we can hear something different from what the general authorities say, that we all give credit to the Holy Ghost, because how many of you say, I twisted the prophet's words to make them better for me? We do not say that. Then why do we, because Freud and others that followed him told us that we're the ones twisting the words to a negative? We teach all the time, and I can pull it up I tried to pull it up earlier. 1989, Boyd K. Packer said that not all inspiration comes from God. Satan has learned how to take the information, the channel of information passing, and distort it in such a way that it requires extreme discernment in order to understand whether it's from Satan or from some other source. Okay? And if you haven't figured this out yet, it's hard to tell sometimes who's talking in your head when it's inspiration, because it feels like it's your own voice. What if Satan could figure out how to talk to you in your own voice in your head? Regain your balance. I don't know what ritual you ladies need to go through. All I know is the phrase, and Enos went up into the mountain to wrestle with God, is very familiar to me. Okay, I am convinced that Enos's conversation started with complaints about his wife. As he was trying to convince God that he was right, it turned into quite the exchange. No, really, she's the problem. We have the story of Joseph Smith, who lost the spirit of translation when he had a conflict with his wife. Okay? He left to gather his thoughts and to be put in his place. I don't know the process that women go through to reestablish it. I've got some ideas, scientific, etc. I'm still learning how that works because it's a full-time job to help men. You kneel. Oh, thank you. You kneel. Duh. Okay? Make sure you're healed from any injury. Take a careful, well-prepared step. Now we could spend, 3 hours on this one? Make sure you are healed from any injury. Okay? We don't have time for that conversation right now. Betrayal, trauma, etc., etc. Okay. Take a careful, well-prepared step. Very slowly pick up speed. If the conversation collapses again, what do you do if you're doing the three-legged race? Start over. Do it again. I've had clients say, You act like this is something I should be comfortable with, this whole start over thing. Have you ever been a musician or an athlete before? Yeah, but that doesn't apply. Okay? Communication is a skill. Athleticism is a skill. Musician's a skill. How many times do you start a song over? I was a violinist for 10 years. You never get the song right the first time. Okay? So, a checklist to see if you're ready to re-enter the conversation. How weird to find one in Scripture instead of science. The charity checklist. Now, I'm going to have you spout out some modern-day translations of each of these phrases as if you are a therapist and you are helping your person be ready to re-enter a conversation. Before you re-enter the conversation, make sure you have the mentality of suffereth long. Translation in modern words? Anyone? Patient. You're patient. I'm patient. We just need to get this conversation over. Okay? I'm patient. He just needs to hear me and hear me now. Okay? Imagine if both people followed this rule. No talking until you feel patience. We would never talk. I says, have you considered talking without the Spirit, and how does that work? He doesn't ever hear anything I say. It never sticks. Shocker. And vice versa. Be is kind. This one's a little easier. Envieth not. How do you include that one? How does that fit in a modern conversation between a man and a woman? Here's mine. You always get to be right. Okay? Imagine if your clients did not talk to each other until they had that fixed. Vaunteth not itself. Anyone want to translate that one?
I want to be right.
I want to be right. And for darn right, I'm going to be. And I'll make sure you know it. Not puffed up. Okay? For me, man, I spent years with the phrase, she can't be right. No. I am the scientist. I am the psychologist. There's no way that what she's saying is true. Doth not behave itself unseemly. Now, when I'm being courageous and bold and I've got a woman who says, please give me accurate feedback, I'm, oh no, I don't want to. That's not fun. Okay? I don't like to give accurate feedback. I found a technique for women. Okay? It's wonderful. You don't actually have to give them feedback. They'll give it to themselves. Say, okay, here's what I want you to imagine. In this, we just reviewed a conversation she had with her spouse. She just finished sharing with me what he did wrong. I says, okay, now let's pretend a video camera was on you the whole time. Okay, that's fine. Okay, fine. He says, okay, we're going to take that and we're going to use it as a training tool in your young women's class in your ward on how to handle a difficult situation. No, delete. I says, what? Was there anything in your behavior that you're not comfortable using to train other women? Okay, so having a camera pointed both directions, is there anything about their behavior that's unseemly? So I don't have to give detailed feedback because I wasn't there for the conversation. I don't know exactly what happened. But I do know that when people, I've even challenged couples, and some have actually followed through on this, actually set up cameras, but your camera is on you and his camera is on him. The only person you're studying is yourself, not the other person. Okay, you only study yourself like an athlete does. Okay? Seeketh not her own. Can you imagine if our clients would go down this checklist before they talk to each other? Not easily provoked. I don't know about women, but this one is like home run for me. I am so good at being easily provoked. Okay? The slightest eyebrow lift. Oh, that makes me so mad when you do that with your eyebrow. I had an itch. No, you were thinking A, B, C, D. Thinketh no evil. I hope you get hit by a truck on your way home from work. Rejoice is not iniquity. We could throw some pornography into that or some other things. Rejoiceth in truth. Beareth all things. Believeth all things. Michael Blair and I were talking earlier today or last night about some different interventions, and I try to listen to other clinicians with some of their skills, and he was talking about imagery, using guided imagery. And I personally do not enjoy participating in role plays when I'm the client or when I'm the student, but I found it's quite enjoyable to be both the husband and the wife during a role play in my office. Okay? And so I've got a wheeled chair so I can switch back and forth a Gestalt style, so I can be him and be her. And you can be obnoxiously accurate sometimes, but I try to make it playful so it's not really right on the mark, because that's really scary and hurtful. But role-playing 9 minutes of silence. Okay? Now, what they first discover is that 9 minutes is more of a goal, and most of us are fast enough to figure something out in less than 9 minutes. So help me do a role play now with some time that we have. Let's do a interaction where he's attempting to, I'll try not to do too many personal flashbacks, but you won't know if this is personal or not unless I say it is. You never consider the needs of our children. Okay? Now, if you've ever heard anything like that, we hear it if we go back to the Four-square listening tool. Where do you write that? Is that one hard to figure out? Okay, so we throw that one in here. It wouldn't be hard to think of something that goes in this box, right? Don't you remember how many times we were told by the therapist to not use the word never? You're never supposed to say never. Do we need to discuss where that conversation goes? How long do we talk about children during that conversation? None. It just crashes into whole, well, you said this 75 times, and I kept track, and I keep it in a notebook. Okay. Now, imagine if the guy was slightly sophisticated and says, hold on a second. What you have to say to me is important to me. I want to write that down. So he writes it down. Then he writes his other thing in the other spot. Now, you don't have to wait till this is completely full and you're completely flooded before you excuse yourself. You say, hold on. I have reason to believe that what you just said is important and there's an important message in it, but I'm not getting it right now. So I'm going to go hang out with God for a minute and see if I can get an accurate translation of what you just said. Okay? Leave the room, go make a sandwich, go get a drink, go check the mail that you checked 3 times already today. Okay? But while you're walking, she says, I never take the needs of the children in consideration. Never take the needs of the children in consideration. Okay, why am I walking? Why am I outside right now? Oh yeah, I'm outside because I'm supposed to be talking to God. Can you believe what she said? I love talking to God, complaining about his daughter. Did you hear how I slipped that in? It's one thing to complain about your wife. He's all, man, she sounds rough. Oh my gosh, I can't believe you live with that woman. Okay? But every time I have this conversation with him, he always tilts the conversation to, yeah, my daughter's a real tough person to be with. Like, why you gotta say it like that? He says, if you don't want to live with my daughter, that's fine. You can move on. You can just scoot on out of here, little boy. Do you want to become a man or, what is it? It's even in the charity chapter. When I was a child, I spoke as a child, acted like a child. You can be a child, just suck your thumb in the corner. Now, you know how God can talk in Japanese, Korean, and South American, whatever? Okay, apparently my language is sarcasm. Because he trash talks me like no other. So when I've explained that to my daughter, my wife, they're all like, he doesn't talk like that to me. He's nice. And I'm all, no, it's revelation. It's been clear. He's got this thing. I can feel his hand. You know how you feel his hand on your shoulder? He puts his hand on my neck. He's all, let's go for a walk. And in my guided imagery, there's this woodshed. And I'm counting the number of steps, and I've got like 10 steps before we get to the back of the woodshed. And he's like, you're a smart boy. You can figure this out real quick. Yes, I can. I got this. I got this. So let's pretend he does this with me all the time. Let's pretend you're smart, Maurice. Now, if you ever want to get a guy to engage his brain, that is a beautiful sentence to start with. Let's pretend you're smart. You have to do it with no sarcasm. Let's pretend you're smart. And he goes, yeah. Yes, I am. It is the fastest way to get a guy into his frontal lobe. He's like, yes, I am smart. Okay? And you, positive assumptions, and you already know what she meant because you're a genius. Yes, I do. Yes. She meant that while we were having a family gathering, I was checking emails on my phone for 7 seconds. I don't know why that bothers her. It's like I don't even do anything bad. She's like, I've never invested. Okay. Can you hear a woman saying you're never paying attention to the needs of the children if she saw him looking at his phone for 7 seconds during a family home evening kind of thing? We got a nod. Okay. Why would she say that instead of the truth? Huh? Why would she say that? The beginning of a negotiation. All right.
Because it's been happening for so long in other areas.
Shh, no, don't say that. Okay, because it's been happening in a lot of different spaces. Does she really mean never? Why do women use the word never? For emphasis. Okay? It's intended to be translated. When one woman says to another woman never, do they say, she really means never? No, they get it. They can translate each other's language. There's no need to fight over terminology because they're looking for, when sisters and girlfriends are talking to each other, they're looking for this. They're not looking for this. When we are with someone that we love and we want to listen to, and we as clinicians, we do this all the time. I've got one client saying to the other, you can't tell him that. That's such a lie. I'm all, I don't need you to tell me what's a lie. I am a therapist. I can figure out what she's trying to say. I can figure out what he's trying to say. Okay, because what do? We translate what they're saying into something more useful. All right? So now imagine if I'm out on this walk and I come back or I figure it out and I enter the room and I says, instead of debating with her over the word never and always, I say, after pondering it over with God and getting a translation that makes sense to me, I can see that my behavior in a family environment is often disconnected and it would be wise for me to do something different about it. How much explaining did she have to do in order for him to come to that conclusion? None. None. Okay? The idea that a man has to keep asking a woman to explain it again and explain it again and explain it again is an insult to him, his intelligence, and his ability to figure things out. Okay? So, a little TMI, a little personal information. Somewhere around the 13th year mark, so it's been about 13 years. My marriage was at its worst. It was highly strained. I couldn't figure out what was going wrong. We were having one of those tense conversations. And then my wife says, I'm sorry, out of the blue. Like, I'm sorry. And I'm all, what? What do you mean you're sorry? I'm the one who's made some serious mistakes here. She goes, I'm sorry. And I'm all, why? I get a little nervous. Why? She goes, because I forgot. Forgot what? I forgot how hard you work to be inspired. I forgot about your intelligence level and your capability. And by attempting to explain this complex concept to you, I've been insulting your intelligence and your ability to get revelation. So would you just go do that thing that Maurice does? Will you just go do that thing? I don't know what you do. I don't know how you do it. But you're a man who's held the priest. You're a man who knows how to get inspiration. Will you please go do that thing that men do where they get revelation and figure out what's wrong with our marriage and what's happening here? What are you supposed to do? Debate that? No, I'm not smart and I'm not capable of revelation. Okay. It slid me into the patriarch position. I went for a very long walk. Not sure how many days it was. But the problem in my marriage was not in any textbook I'd ever read. It was something that was subtle and difficult to put your finger on. And so if I kept looking through what was already available, I never would have found the problem. And so it required revelation in order to get through it. The purpose of these tools is to help our couples keep the spirit present, or in scientific terms, keep them out of their animal brain and in their frontal lobe. Okay? It requires role-playing, where you show them how to be quiet. It's really neat to do this in person, where you see the husband hear something that's painful to him, you pause the conversation, and you say, hold on, let's do the entire process. Where's your piece of paper? I don't have a piece of paper. Where can you get a piece of paper? I don't know. Where am I supposed to get a piece of paper? We are in a therapy office. Okay. Look at this. How lovely. I happen to have a clipboard right here with a pen next to it. Hand it to him. What do you do next? I don't know what to do next. Do you hear what she said? I'm a, what's the next step? Draw the stupid square. Okay, what happens to him as he's writing the square down? It's disconnecting his cognitive process, so he has to do something manual. It's already going to break the circuits in his brain where he was at, so he has to connect. He has to start thinking about what's going on. Okay, what goes in the first square? I don't know what goes in the first square. Remember it. You wrote it down 5 minutes ago. Look for it. Oh! So he's distracted by this. He's not thinking about what she said right now. Then he pulls out and goes, okay, what did she say? What did you say? No, it's in there. We know it's in there. You can remember what she said. He finds it, writes it down. Okay, I have to pause her with a break thing. She wants to say more. No, don't say more yet. This is going to take forever. Do you know how long this is going to take for us to have any conversation? He says, well, let's measure how useful your conversations have been before. Okay. So he writes it down. He says, now, do you need to go for a walk, or can you do it while you're sitting here? We're going to be quiet until you receive a revelation that interprets what she said correctly. It's amazing to watch what they do. They look at it. Says, you could pray or not. You can do what you want to do with that. Now, of course, these are people who want spiritual interventions. These are people who have requested the use of their religion in the therapeutic process. Okay? You can explain it to them. I like to buy a moment of time and just kind of talk a little bit more about the science of what's happening right now. Okay, right now, you are having a chance, wife, to gather your thoughts, to formulate what the priorities are of what you say. You are having the opportunity to run it through a translator. You're calming down. You're becoming more clear-headed. And then, well, I don't know, it's usually more than 2 minutes, sometimes as many as 9, for him to say, all right, I got it. I figured out what she was trying to say. Okay? Because the idea that they can't figure it out is ridiculous. By the time they get to our offices, they've known each other for a long time. He knows exactly what her message is, and she knows exactly what his message is. But they need to be in their frontal lobe in order to be able to produce it. Then I have them, before he talks, I says, do you feel like you have the answer? Yes. He says, okay, let's go down the charity checklist. Now, granted, I don't always follow the entire list. I'll try to pinpoint the ones that are currently disruptive. Because how many times when we think about the life-altering, life-changing, catalytic experiences, is it because of just one thought, one idea, one phrase, one sentence? We watch our couples disconnect from each other because they are fire hosing each other, because they're stonewalling each other, all those things that Gottman refers to that collapses communication. But when they are seeking to put things in that bottom right square, don't talk until you have something inspired to say, something that is useful and valuable, and make sure you have the Spirit with you when you say it. But I have a right to talk like this. I just read about speaking your truth. Okay? I appreciate the vitalness of being aware of what you're actually experiencing and having no internal self-betrayal of any form. But are you really speaking your truth and behaving your truth if on video you'd be embarrassed to show it to your granddaughters? Are you really passing a message on in a way that you're proud of? Okay? The men also, we do so many subtle things as men, hoping that she can't see that I was just grinding my teeth. I had no idea. My wife and I were traveling somewhere during this tense phase of life, and I was pretty impressed with myself, my ability to hold my tongue. I can hold my tongue. I can hold it for a long time. We were driving somewhere, and we pull up to one of those places that has one of those big old power stations with that make your windows vibrate when you're parked next to them. She goes, "That's it." I'm like, "What do you mean? That's it? That's what it's like to be in the house with you sometimes." Awesome. That's just awesome. Okay. These phrases, if you don't have the Spirit, if you have not charity, okay, and we don't get to blame the other person for us not having the Spirit and for us not having charity. You don't get to stand before God and describe the sandbox fight you just had. Well, she threw sand at me first. Well, he was mad first. You don't get to stand before God and say, I have a right to do it wrong because they did it wrong and they hurt me. We don't get to do that. Okay? And so if we can, Help them learn how to have personal integrity with their own behavior. Do not re-enter the conversation until you are good with God, until you have the Spirit with you, until your message is inspired. And yes, as it's been mentioned before, it's going to take about 200 tries to teach them to actually do this correctly. Okay? So they're going to try, and they're going to say after 3 efforts, that didn't work. That didn't work. That didn't work. Okay? But it does work. Now, for more information on this, and it's in there, this is what I'm presenting to you today is one of 50 different lessons on marriage repair. And so, if you want your clients to have access to it, the goal is to train people. If you contact me directly, I have this special I'm the Boss passcode to get it to you for extremely inexpensive called free. Okay? So it's a year's worth of lessons that are self-paced, that are designed to help a couple walk through this process. Okay? To work them all the way through from the collapsing of their relationship. We call it the Lazarus Lectures. One of my staff members was saying, okay, Maurice, we can't find a title for this. Can you please, give me an idea of who you're trying to serve? He says, well, almost every couple that comes in my office is pretty much dead. So I'm really hoping to raise their marriages from the dead. And so Lazarus Lectures refers to raising marriages from the dead. Okay? I was introduced to a platform where we can put videos and audio clips and actual sessions where we have permission from the clinicians or from the client to use their sessions, write-ups, etc. So 50 weeks of lessons. And if you want a sampling of it as a clinician, we'll get that to you so you can taste it. Any questions as we wrap up? Okay, I hope this serves you and your clientele.